Hey guys, it's Saria. Welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be a new ear tutorial featuring these really cute patches of Daisy and Donald in honor of approaching Valentine's Day. And it also features a magnetic removable bow, so if you're interested in seeing how to make them, then just keep watching. Unfortunately, I lost the footage of me cutting out the silky fabric that I'm using, but using the ear cutting line template, I'm just going to cut 4 out of this really pretty white fabric. I know it looks kind of just white on camera, but it has like an iridescent quality. It's very pretty. With a sheet of felt, I did choose white because it's going underneath a white satin fabric, and this way it won't show from underneath. I'm going to trace 4 of the ear cutting line templates onto here and then cut those out using a rotary blade, but you can also just use some scissors to cut these out. Just make sure that you follow along the line of your template. Next, using the template labeled foam and batting, we're going to trace 4 of those onto a piece of cardboard and cut those out as well. For these, I like to cut them out using an X-Acto knife rather than scissors. It helps the cardboard kind of like keep its shape and stiffness so that it gives you still a nice set of ears. Sometimes when you cut it out with scissors, you're kind of squishing the cardboard. Now that we have all of the layers, we're going to start assembling. So I will first place the cardboard onto the felt ear and then fold over the edges of the felt and tap it down into the hot glue. You want to work in small sections of hot glue if you've never done this before. The glue does dry pretty quickly and you don't want to be rushing and burning your fingers. So just be careful and work in small segments until you kind of get used to it. I like to start in the center and then work my way on the sides, and I don't close up the bottom until I have all of the layers attached. And next is that satin fabric layer. So putting it face down, I'm going to fold over the edges onto the top of the ear first. Again, just putting a line of hot glue and then folding over the fabric and tapping it down into the glue. With satin fabrics, you don't want to pull too tight because they don't have any stretch. So just make sure you keep your ear centered and you're not overly pulling the fabric. You're just keeping it a comfortable tightness. After you finish up the sides, then we're going to close up the bottom. I like to cut the bottom in half, if that makes sense. Like right here, I just kind of snip it in half because that allows you to fold it over in 2 pieces, and that prevents any kind of puckering or weird wrinkles on the bottom. And it just gives you a nice finished look. And then you just put some hot glue, fold over the fabric, and tap it down into the hot glue. And you have your first half of an ear. Now, because this fabric has no stretch, I was having a little bit of an issue on the corner here, but I just added a little bit more hot glue and then just pressed the edge of that fabric down into the glue until it smoothed out. You're going to repeat those steps and then create the other half of your ear. I am using for the edges this kind of like stretchy, elastic, lacy trim from Walmart. I just really like the girliness of it, and so first I'm going to glue my 2 halves together. So you can see here I'm applying a pretty liberal amount of hot glue, but I just keep it away from the edges and keep it more toward the center, if that makes sense, because you don't want the glue to ooze out the sides and get all over your ear or your hands. So just make sure that you don't put it right on the edge of the ear. And then firmly, you can see how firmly I'm pressing these ears together because I want to make sure that the glue adheres really nicely. If you still feel like the ear is warm or hot to the touch, then still hold it in place because it means that the glue has not fully dry yet. So next we're going to be attaching the trim to these ears, doing a thin line of hot glue in the little crevice between the 2 halves, and then you're going to tap down the trim into the glue. So I'm using this little silicone tool. This is actually for applying face masks, and I got it from Dollar Tree, and it works really, really well for this because it doesn't stick to the hot glue. And then I'm going to continue applying hot glue, stretching the trim over, and then just using this little tool to poke down into the glue. You could also use any type of like metal ended tool, I think, because I don't think the hot glue would stick to it or cause any problems, but you kind of just need something that's not going to leave a mark to poke the trim down into that little crevice. And then continuing all the way around, hot glue, pushing the trim down, and just working my way to the end of the ear and then cutting off the excess. And now you can move on to making the other ear, because once that's done, we're ready to get these onto the headband. So I'm using these patches. I do have them linked from the Etsy shop that I bought them from. They're so cute. I love the little gold edging. They remind me of Stony Clover, and they're so much more affordable. So I'm actually going to be hot gluing these on. I think I probably should have done a little bit of E6000 as well, just to make sure they stood the test of time. But hot glue did adhere them incredibly well. So the reason that I didn't glue the ears on just yet is because I wanted to decide if I wanted a bow. I wasn't totally sure at this point. So I am just gluing the patches on. I put them pretty far to the sides so that if I did add a bow, it wouldn't block their faces. So if you add them like right in the center of the ear and then you want to have a bow, the bow is going to block them. So just keep that in mind if you are going to be adding the bow, because obviously you don't want to cover up half their faces. And now I'm lining these up on the headband and applying hot glue to the bottom of the ear, and then using the template, I'm just firmly pressing them down onto the headband and letting the glue set and dry, and then applying glue to the other ear and doing the same thing on the other side. If this is your first time making ears, I would highly suggest just taking a little pencil or something and marking your headband where the ears should go, because then you don't have to leave them down on your table to attach them and make sure they get in the right place. And once those two ears are attached, we can move on to the bow. So I decided to do a magnetic bow because, again, I wasn't sure if I wanted these to have one. So my compromise is to make a bow that's removable, and this is how I like to do that. So I have these super strong magnets that are pretty tiny, and I glue one onto the center of the headband using hot glue just to hold it in place for now. We are going to reinforce it with some ribbon. So just some white satin ribbon. This one's from the Dollar Tree. I'm going to cut a shorter piece and use a lighter to burn my edges. That way they don't fray. Be careful doing this, obviously. And I'm going to glue this starting on the bottom of the headband, and then I'm going to really tightly wrap this around the magnet. And I mean, like, after that hot glue has dried, like, put some muscle into this and make sure that it's really nice and tight. This is what's going to give that magnet a little bit more reinforcement to make sure it doesn't shift around or move. If you are nervous about that, you can also use E6000. So just a combination of the hot glue. Wherever you put hot glue, also put E6000, and it will provide a very permanent hold. So now that we have the magnet hidden in this little white ribbon cover, which I promise when this is on your head, you can't see it at all. And then obviously, I should have said this, but if you're using a black headband, I would use black ribbon to hide it. So just showing you guys, the magnet attaches through the ribbon just fine. And I also had to make sure that my bow fabric was not super thick, because the magnet is now having to go through 2 layers of fabric, and it is a very strong magnet, but it's also a little bit small. So you just want to make sure that your magnet is going to be able to stick through the fabric of the bow and that ribbon. So next we're going to start making the bow, and I have this pink, really light blush color that has some glitter in it. It matches Daisy's bow on the patch perfectly. So I'm going to make my own bow using some felt, and cutting down this felt piece, I ended up cutting it to 3x5 and just kind of holding it up to the ears and making sure it looks like it's the right size. For this ear, I wasn't super scientific about it. I cut the felt piece to 3x5 and then I put it on my fabric, and I made sure to cut enough fabric to cover it completely. So you can see me there, and then I fold the fabric over and give myself a couple inches of extra, because you always want to make sure that you're, giving yourself some room for error. And then after just cutting myself a rectangle that I knew would completely cover the felt, I'm going to go in with my hot glue. So again, it was 5 inches by 3 inches for the felt. And starting with the sides, I'm going to create a fake hemline and do a thin line of hot glue, and then just fold over my fabric and very lightly tap it into the hot glue. You don't need to press this super hard. You just want to lightly tap it so it's attached to that felt. And then I am angling my corners, because sometimes they stick out really weird on bows if you don't do this. Which, by the way, if you don't like this method of making bows, if you want to see other ways, I do have an entire tutorial on bow making, and it gives you, I think, 7 or 8 different versions of a bow, and a lot of them are no-sew, but some of them are sewing options as well. But starting with the corners, I'm just going to kind of fold them in and tack them down with a little dot of hot glue and tap it down. And then underneath the center part, I'm just going to do a thin line of hot glue and tack that down. And then I'll do the same thing on the other side, just folding it over and making sure it meets up kind of nicely. doing a dot of hot glue on the inside and pinching it and then tapping that down, a dot of hot glue, pinching it a little bit, and then in the center doing a very thin line of hot glue and just tapping that down. For the center of this bow, I'm going to be using this pink satin ribbon, that I also got from Dollar Tree, and I'm going to pinch my bow into a bow shape or an accordion shape. I'm going to use a little bit of hot glue in the center just to hold its shape a little bit better. It makes it a little easier to wrap the ribbon around if the hot glue is what's holding it in place. And next we're going to be attaching the magnet to the bow. Now make sure that your magnet is facing the correct way to attach to the headband. I usually triple check this just to make sure. And then I'm adding the teeniest dot of hot glue, putting the magnet into that hot glue, allowing that to dry just a little bit, and then I'm going to take the ribbon and do kind of the same thing that I did on the headband. I'm going to use the ribbon to really hold this magnet in place and pull it tight. And then you can double layer the ribbon on the bottom. Just make sure that your magnet is strong enough to go through those 2 layers. I'm doing it just above the magnet, so my little fold right there doesn't cover my magnet. That way it's mostly just like a single layer that magnet's having to push through, if that makes sense. And then there we go. We have a little pink sparkly bow. And it's removable, so this is really cute. And I also, in my head, had it to where I thought I could do holiday bows with this, and then I would always have a year-long Donald and Daisy set of ears, which makes me really happy.
Have you ever noticed I'm the greatest scientist in the world?
I have, actually.
You're the second best scientist in the world because what's 5.5? 10.
5 plus 5?
Yeah.
Ah.
5 plus 5 equals 10. Mama, is equal right?
Yes, equal is right.
What does equal mean?
Equal means if you add those 2 things together, what do you get? What does it equal?
5 plus, how do you make a plus?
It's like a lowercase t, like a little cross.
Like this?
Yes.